Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We have part two with Collin MEEVES. Collin, welcome back. Long time no see.
Right? What have we even our
Yeah.
talk during the intermission here? We've been
Yeah.
missing each other, right?
Yeah,
Thank you for
exactly.
having me, Matt.
Yeah, dude. It's so good to have you back on. All right. Well, I intentionally wanted to do a part two here, so we can lead with this particular part. We're going to lead with part two for Beyond Recovery. And of course, have this is as legit part two for my coaching podcast, Matt Gardner Live. So I want to talk to you about your choice, your conscious choice to redefine and change your relationship with alcohol. How has it been going? What's your day count up to if you do day counts? Just yeah, the floor is yours. Tell us about your change of relationship with alcohol.
My change of relationship with alcohol has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. Outside of like marrying my wife, having our daughter, so on and so forth. Like those are
Yeah.
up to, but this decision is up there for me. Um, because quick background on that for you guys who are not familiar with it is like I grew up. My dad was an alcoholic from like age 6 of my life until 26 when he passed. So 20 years, the majority of my life. I knew my grandfather, his dad was an alcoholic. And then last year in 2022, I found out that it went another generation or two before that. And I always knew I wanted to be this transition generation and make this change. And I just started to notice that there's this voice in my head when I drank, and I started noticing the subtleties of not honoring the boundaries of how much I wanted to drink, or if I didn't want to drink going into a social situation. And I just started getting really clear on the vision for my life, what I wanted to be accomplishing, and what was really serving me or not. And alcohol was not serving me in any way. It was all negative things that were hindering my progress. So I decided to, hey, let me try this for at least 30 days. And I committed to that. And then here I am, probably close to 300 days later. I don't know the exact count, but 9 to 10 months later. And it's like, I shared this with someone over the weekend, that it was easy, and it has been easy for me. Like there really has not been any social situation with drinking around that I'm like needing to pull myself away from this situation because it's so connected with my purpose. And on part one, we talked about my purpose, and it's just like there's so many people out there that they don't even know why they drink. They just do it because it's the social thing to do. But when I tell people about it, like I did this weekend, I was at my wife's holiday party as a delayed holiday party because she works in the hospital and they were very busy over the winter months. And I was sharing with the bartenders at this event because I was just asking for soda water. And they're like, "Oh, are you the DD tonight?" And I'm like, "Yeah, in a way. But honestly, I've just chosen to be alcohol free. It started last year. Alcoholism ran 4 generations deep in my family, and I'm the one that's ready to make the change." And they're like, "Wow, that's so cool." And they're just like filling my soda water up, and they're like so intrigued by me just sharing that.
Mm,
So there's so many people out there that I've recognized that when I share that, they're like, "Dude, I've always thought about that. So cool."
mm,
So yeah, it's been fun. I'll definitely put it that way. I've
mm.
enjoyed this process a lot.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for sharing. So a couple things that come up, the ease in which you do it. So some folks, especially early on in their sobriety journey might get a little itchy when they start hearing that. It's there's a different spectrum for different people.
Right.
I like how it's not from a braggadocious standpoint. There's a reason why. Because I'm very in tune. I'm speaking for you. I'm very in tune with my purpose, and as a result, you're focusing on your purpose versus the inability to drink, right? Like instead of focusing on I can't drink, and which can be definitely a hang up, man. Like I mean, for myself, that was a big one starting out, is like the focusing on the lack of or what I can't do, right? The negations, right? We
Mm-hmm.
talk about. So I'm like, I can't drink. I can't drink when I go out. And that puts me in this state of like stress and panicking and wondering what other people are going to think, and being really sort of a victim to the environment, as opposed to on the flip side of it, the way that you're talking, and you're because of like I'm living my purpose, and as a result, your brain and you're the Google engine of your brain is focusing on your purpose and bringing up articles and evidence for that versus the flip side of it, right? So that's the first thing that really was really cool that came up. Secondly, another big one that I find, when talking in my own story and just talking with other people, is this idea that you're going to be shunned or made fun of or whatnot. And you're finding the exact opposite. People are actually intrigued, and you're perhaps inspiring people to look a little bit deeper in themselves, and, that have that same sort of thing. And so that's another sort of myth that you've busted in your experiences anyways. The one question that comes up though is like, what did you find that were your reasons to drink in the first place? Was it just curiosity? Was there certain situations that were just like, that's a must drink situation? What was your relationship before with alcohol?
I would say it was it had different phases. Contrary to most people's high school experience, college experience, I didn't drink much. I didn't party in high school at all. So after high school, a little bit more freedom. I started drinking just because it's what the cool people did, and it's like, get drunk, have a good time. And it's not like, it wasn't this malicious thing by any means. It was like, we had periodically, like, I don't know, 5, 6 times a year, like go to the one friend's parents' house that, they didn't care that they were gone for the weekend, and be a very small outing of us, what people would call like kickbacks back in the day, right? Back in the day, I'm such an old person.
Yeah.
But that's what it was. It was a curiosity. It was just like, hey, this is what people do to have fun. And having grown up, knowing my dad was an alcoholic, is like, I didn't really associate it with that. It was completely different from that. As I turned 21, it's still, even going out to bars was like, I didn't like it, but I'm like, oh, this is what people do to be social. So, and I didn't do it often because I was competing in CrossFit at the time. It was just like, oh, this is what people do to have fun. So I'll do it every once in a while. So I really didn't drink that much the early part of my 20s. Once I turned about 25, that's when I was exiting the competitive arena in CrossFit, and was more of like a regular person, if you want to call it that. And a lot of the people at the gym that I worked at, that's what they did socially. They got together, they drank, and I started hanging out with those people. And it just was like a byproduct of the environment. The people that I hung out with, that's what they did. And then it became a very regular thing that I was drinking on the weekends, and, more times than not, getting drunk, and most people wouldn't admit that, but that's what it was, because like, oh, that's the way to have a good time. And I'd be staying up late and then wake up on Sunday, go work out some more, and just completely blasting my nervous system and my body and all this stuff. And then the next phase that this turned into was especially around 2019, 2020, when I was starting to really feel and notice these thoughts and sensations around being unfulfilled and not really happy with my life. I wasn't where I thought I would be at that point in time. There's something more out there. There's a leveling up for myself. And then it became more of this escape of like, let me get to the weekend and then I can drink.
Yeah.
And then, especially once the shutdown happened, it's like, my wife's pregnant. She's not drinking with me. We're isolated from everybody. And here I am every Friday and Saturday drinking a 6-pack. Again, not like an alcoholic, but still something that I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I'm not talking to myself nicely about this.
Yeah,
and I didn't recognize it, and I wouldn't admit it, but it definitely was turning into more of a quote unquote problem than not.
Yeah, for sure. That's such a relatable story too. It's this insidious thing, this relationship, oftentimes with addictive behaviors, right? Where it starts off harmless enough, we'll say. I mean, that's relative. But
Right.
It's like whether it's this conditioning or it's like what other people are doing. So it's a degree of fitting in, and it starts off, under that context. And then before you know, or not before, well, in a sense, before you know it, a few years down the line, it's like this relationship that's become literally toxic, both like physically and mentally, right? So, yeah, super relatable story. Yeah, really cool, man. And I imagine, certain other things external. There's a lot of, people in recovery, like myself too, as my recovery is like anchoring it to something that's like external. It's an inside job, yes, and I had to be ready for it, and anybody that's in recovery has to be ready for it. It doesn't necessarily take an external. In fact, it's for me, it was the opposite. A doctor told me to stop drinking. I'd be like, you know what, fuck you. And on the way out, I'd get a 6-pack. You know what I mean? I'd be right to the liquor store. You can't tell me how to live. The inner
Right.
rebellious side of me, right? So, but I imagine it's like I did have a few external anchoring things that like can reflect back to me and hold me accountable beyond just my inside, the inner work that I've done. And that was like, my dad passed in from, and he was a heavy drinker as well. So like a living tribute to him. So similarities as far as our stories that way, is breaking that lineage of alcohol use in the family.
Mm.
I imagine for you too, it's you being a young parent right now, young children, you yourself are young. I mean, in relation to me anyways. So is that safe to say? Is that sort of like an anchor as well? You're looking at your family now, and you're the father of this family. And is that sort of like that one of those reflective points where like, this is a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing as well?
It was huge. Even as you're asking the question, like I'm emotional thinking about it right now. Like the ability to make that change for my daughter. Like a lot of what I'm working through right now, and not by any means that am I like, oh my gosh, my parents destroyed me, but like that's what I'm working through, is like this traumatic feeling of lack of safety, because my dad would come in every single night and like slam cabinets and doors and like just be cussing under his breath, and it's like he was in and out, and every time he came in there was just this like don't talk, don't move,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
when I see my daughter now, she's 2.5, and I'm like, dude, even when I just get frustrated with her, just typical frustration of like, I want her to, she's frustrated about something and I don't understand. And I'm just like, I can't imagine putting her into this environment where I could see myself going. That's why I started noticing,
Yeah.
um, like just those small instances that after a few drinks, it's like, oh, maybe I'm not paying attention to my wife in the way that I really want to be because I want to be connected to her, or I'm being
Mhm.
short with her, or
Right.
saying things that it's not that I'm not actually saying, but I'm not in the right state of mind to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And as my daughter was starting to enter the picture, my wife being pregnant, it's like, I just want to take the thing, which was alcohol, that could be the contributor to me just going down the slippery slope. Like, let's
Mm.
just get rid of it,
Yeah.
So she was a huge influence, because I'm thinking not just her, but the generations beyond her, that it's like
Yeah. Right.
this alcoholism thing is stopping here.
Mm.
They'll know about it. I will talk to them about it.
Mhm.
I may be drinking then. I don't know. We'll see. I haven't made that decision, but it's like there's going to be that conversation around it. Where with my family, it wasn't this talked about thing.
Right.
Let's talk about it,
Yeah.
so that way there's not this rebellious nature of it. Like be
Yeah.
aware of it,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So yes, my daughter was a huge influence on that.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. It's yeah, just to tail off on that last phrase that you mentioned, or last thing you said, is like you can look at like European cultures where it is, and it's not all like generalizing, but I know a few like Italian people where it was talked about, right? And it was like you were allowed to drink at like 14 or 16 just to see what it was like. So it removed that whole rebellious teenager thing. About, for me, it was like going and drinking in the woods with some buddies and smoking our first cigarette because it was like, taboo. You're not supposed to do it. So like, well, of
Yeah,
course we're going to do it. It's like especially when you're like you're developing a personality, and, and there's some peer pressure and such. It's like, don't do this. You're like, well, I kind of want to do it now. You know what I mean?
there's this
So
allure about it, right?
yeah, there
And
sure
it's the
is.
same thing. Like we've talked about this overlying theme of negations versus affirmations, right? It's like
Yeah.
I'm so conscious of it, and I want to be conscious of it when I'm talking to my daughter, instead of telling her stop or don't do that. Is like
Yeah.
I take a moment when I do phrase it that way to rephrase it in a way of like, hey, what can you do? Because
Right.
when you in my experience too, and I wasn't a super rebellious kid. I was pretty straight and narrow for the most part. But the more that someone's told not to do, there's this allure about it.
Mm.
Like, oh, why
Yep.
can't I do it?
Yep.
And when you just take a moment, I imagine when I say you, if I were to take a moment and just break down, like, say my daughter's doing something now at 2.5, she likes to explore, that is potentially, I can't say that she's going to get hurt, because, and I'm not going to say that because I don't know that.
Right. Right.
And if I just say, hey, you could do this, this could happen.
Mm.
I'm
Hmm.
not saying it's going to happen,
Hmm.
but this could happen. And it's the same thing as like if we continue to phrase, and I keep on saying we, if I continue to phrase, don't do this, you can't do that. Well, no, she can. She has the freedom to do it. It's a choice.
Right.
And I want my daughter to understand that it's always a choice.
Mm.
You
Hmm.
could do that.
Hmm.
You can do that. This is a possible result.
Mm.
And a
Hmm.
lot of times people say consequences, but it's a possible result. A
Right.
consequence is implying, in my mind, that something negative or bad will happen.
Right.
There's a
Right.
cause and effect to this.
Yeah.
You do this, this could happen. It's not guaranteed, it could. So I share that as like when it comes to this alcohol thing and drugs in particular, it's like, I mean, my wife's a nurse and she works at a pediatrics hospital here in California, and there's kids upwards of 18. They see so many uh, cases of overdoses. It's
Mm.
prevalent,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's like I imagine all these kids hearing like, "Well, you can't do that. Don't do that." And I'm not advocating for kids to take drugs. No, no,
Right.
I want to be clear about that. But it's this opening of this conversation, like, "Hey, this is why I'm encouraging you not to do it."
Right. Right. Exactly. Versus a very, yeah, old-fashioned way of parenting, quite frankly, and even of discussing life decisions and such. For sure, man,
Yes.
because there is a party after you hear, or after I heard enough of negation statements or don't do this and all that. Yeah, dude. I was a curious teenager, same as you. For the most part, I was a good kid. There was part of me that wanted to uh see what's the hubbub, like why is this so rejected and such, right? So absolutely, it's all context is so key. Collin, I love having you on the show again. I really appreciate you. I'll let you get out of here. Somebody that's listening to your story with alcohol, and I always like to wrap it up with this on this particular program. Somebody's listening to your story. It's like, what kind of advice would you give, or just what kind of reflection in your, you said 9 or 10 months
Hmm.
sober, just to kind of sum it up in a a couple phrases, what would it be?
I like this question. Um, Stay curious. Is like I say that statement of stay curious because along this whole way, it's like, have I had these inclinations to want to drink? Yes, I have.
Mm.
And that's why when I started this podcast episode, like I have this hesitancy to want to say it's been easy because everybody's journey is a little bit different. And I don't easy is not the most accurate word, as I found it fun and I found
Mm.
it challenging at the same time
Gotcha.
because I've stayed curious
Mm.
when I've wanted and had the inclination to want to drink. And it hasn't been necessarily been strong, but I've been like, why do I want to drink right now? And what is it that I really am just wanting?
Mm.
Because the drinking is this avenue to fulfill something that I really want.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I give this example because after getting curious, like Fridays and Saturdays, I drink sparkling water, like a flavored sparkling water. And it's this fizziness, this special drink. I put some fruit in it, some like frozen fruit. And like, it's just, I want something different than the norm.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
And that's what I found is like, I love that on Fridays and Saturdays. I go grocery shopping on either Friday or Saturday and I go get a soda water and um, it's got flavor to it, and I absolutely love it. And it literally it does the same thing that alcohol. It accomplishes the root of what I really wanted. It's just something a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I wouldn't have understood that unless I stayed curious.
Mm.
Um, and at the same time, like staying curious also has meant in those situations when I've had that inclination to want to drink and I'm say at a kid's birthday party. Why the fuck do I want to drink at a kid's birthday party? you know? And
Yeah.
that's one example where I did have an instance where I was at a kid's third birthday party this
Hmm.
last summer.
Hmm.
And someone that I have known for quite some time and have interacted in social environments where we drank, he offered me a beer. And I said, no, thank you. I appreciate it. And he's like, what? Why not? And I'm like, I'm just not drinking right now, you know? And it's like one of the few times it wasn't like he was being hard on me or anything like that. But what I recognized in that day is like, why am I drinking at a kid's birthday party? Like, is it really that unbearable that I need to drink? No. What I really want, and it comes back to the stay curious thing, has led me to then focusing on what it is that I do want, the affirmations of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's led me to that every single time where I'm not thinking about, oh, I'm not drinking. I'm not in the same state of mind that those other people are.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I'm connected and I'm tapped into me and my purpose. I want to be present with my daughter here. I want to engage with her. I don't want to be over there drinking and having the guys conversation because a kid's birthday party is for moms to just be chasing the kids around and for dudes to be over there shooting the shit drinking.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, like when I think about it, like what's the advice is like maybe not stay curious, but get curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you get that feeling coming up, ask yourself, why? Why do I want to?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then what is it that I really want? And the other advice that I would give is get yourself a journal
Yeah.
and a pen
Yeah. Yeah.
and just start writing it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. And one of the big terms right now is sober curious, right? That's been, I'd say the last like 4 or 5 years. There's a book that was called Sober Curious, I believe, or the term came from it. And, that's a big thing right now. There's a lot of people that are doing exactly as you're mentioning, like really being more conscious about, there's conscious eating now, there's conscious drinking. People are going, okay, why? What is it that's inside of me that's wanting to? So yeah, it really ties in beautifully with that. So thanks for ending on that, Collin. So yes, Collin _ MEEVES. We'll have this in the show notes and the Aligned Lifestyle podcast. Any final words, Collin?
Oh, other than I appreciate you having me on, Matt. I love conversations and
Yeah, dude.
anytime you need a guest, I'm here for you, man.
Appreciate it, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on. Collin MEEVES, everybody. Thanks again.